Yup, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation. Well, to tell you that, I'd have to tell you about this week's Steam Deck news. What's good, Deck Gang? I love how many of y'all hit me up to let me know that Valve published a Teardown video. Clearly, we all knew what the lead topic for today's video had to be. And what a glorious teardown it was. First, for what it represented. With the Steam Deck, Valve is targeting both tinkerers and non-tinkerers. Valve maintained that balance very well in this video, but clearly it was aimed at the former audience, the person that fights for the right to repair and is bold enough to open and service their own devices. There were plenty of caveats as to why one should not do so. I hope and expect that the average consumer will heed those warnings. But for the rest of us, we got a clear signal from Valve that they are looking out for us. They didn't wait for iFixit or Linus Tech Tips to do the teardown. They did one themselves before the product was even released. This is a bit reminiscent of when Sony did a teardown of the PS5 1 year ago. Like seriously, these videos were uploaded 1 day shy of a full year apart. That's a neat coincidence. The difference between these two teardowns is that despite the caveats, or maybe in part due to the caveats, the Steam Deck teardown is much more instructional. Even the direct static camera angle is more helpful, whereas Sony's was more produced. And yeah, I think the warnings here are just as helpful to the tinkerers as they are to the non-tinkerers. They give us a notion of what to look out for, what to research when we're shopping for parts, and what is the short-term and long-term effect of opening our device. Another thing that's amazing about this teardown is the relative ease. I'm comparing this to opening a modern smartphone or even some of the other handheld gaming PCs on the market. There are 3 tools on the cutting board, 2 screwdrivers, and a pair of anti-static tweezers, the latter for pulling on small connections. Surprisingly, there are no shims involved. I wonder if you'll need shims to pry open a freshly unopened final product, or if this is really it. The Steam Deck is sitting face down on a custom mold that looks to be used to hold the device in place without having to put undue pressure on the analog sticks or the screen. They make mention of buying replacement parts. Hopefully this mold is also available for purchase. After removing 8 screws, he removes the backplate using only his fingers to pry it off. Once that's done, we see the inside of the device. As you can imagine, everything is tightly packed, and interestingly, Linus's analysis of the innards using only his trusty thermal cam is pretty spot on. There's a cage here that has to be removed to get to the SSD, but the memory and APU are also under here. There's an assembly for the left and right analog sticks on each side. Nice touch with the L and R labeling. Right below each is a board for what appears to be the trackpad input. It's a little hard to tell because I think these boards stretch to underneath the shoulder buttons, but I believe they handle the rest of the inputs as well. D-pad, Steam, and select buttons for the left, ABXY, start, and ellipses buttons on the right. Shoulder buttons and paddles for each look like they live here too. You can even see the switches for the paddles. The battery takes a lot of space here. The fan is here, but I'm not sure what it's pointing at. Perhaps it's blowing heat from the heatsink out through the exhaust, which lives at the top of the device. And finally, here's the SSD. Overall, we got a really good look at most of the components. We got a thorough understanding of how to replace the SSD or an analog stick. We got plenty of appropriate warnings as to why we should not do any of this and leave it to the professionals. And mostly, we got the impression from Valve that there will be a clear avenue for hardware servicing and support, including the ability to buy individual replacement parts. The biggest con of the teardown are the self-tapping screws, which can damage the housing if over-tightened. Consequently, they point out that the structural integrity of the deck will be lessened as soon as you open it. Overall, this was an excellent teardown, and it seemed to be received that way too. Do you think you'll be opening up your device? If so, why? Let me know in the comments. Also, now's a good time to say I think you can see I put a lot of work into these news videos. If you like what I'm doing, like, subscribe, and slap the bell. While a bit overshadowed by the teardown, the other big news from Wednesday was seeing Witcher 3 play on the Steam Deck courtesy of The Witcher's official account on Twitter. I would say this marks the first time we've seen a AAA game run outside of Valve's offices. There were a lot of questions about what graphical preset was used and what the frame rate was, but the truth is we don't know. I reached out to CDPR to ask them about that, and they said they didn't really have anything further to say on the subject. I've seen footage of the Ioneer run Witcher 3 at 30 FPS and at 60 FPS, the latter with resolution scaling. So I would say I'm fairly confident that the Steam Deck can run Witcher 3 at 60 FPS, but it might require some tweaks like resolution scaling. To my eye, I thought the footage looked quite good, and CDPR have plenty of time to optimize. On the subject of optimization, I also reached out to Bennett Foddy some time back with some questions, and he sent over his answers this week. We've learned a lot since I first asked those questions, but the responses are still enlightening here. He mentions that there are hitches in his game getting over it that persist for a minute or two after the game loads, but after running for a few minutes, it hits a solid 60 FPS. The fact that it eventually hits a consistent 60 gives him confidence that he should be able to resolve the issue, and he even has a hunch as to what might be causing it. This seems to be a good example of what to expect. A lot of the the top games may have these kings ironed out before launch, but for everyone else, there may be some delay between the launch of the deck and better optimization of the fuller library. Bennett also said that he's testing his native Linux build as opposed to Proton. He confirmed that Valve is providing hooks in the Steam API to read that the device used is a deck, and he said he may use that to set optimal defaults, but would likely still allow the audience to modify those settings. As for fans, heat, and comfort, he says that the fans do become noticeable, but not distracting. The heat is not a problem because the grips are so far from where the heat is, and that it's been pretty comfortable, but he's only played on the couch as opposed to any sort of commuter situation. Finally, he mentions that he's tested analog sticks and trackpad, and that for his game he thinks he prefers trackpad. No gyro test yet, but he may give it a shot. We also got a chance to see Rogue Legacy 2 on the deck, and you know how I feel about indies on deck. The devs pointed out that the screen looks great, which is awesome. It's been a rough week for the Steam Deck screen, with the Switch OLED version getting rave reviews. Another top story this week was this piece from The Verge, where they asked developers of top games that are currently incompatible with Linux because of anti-cheat whether or not they are working on support for Linux. Most of them, like the devs of Apex Legends, Destiny 2, and Fall Guys, either provided no comment or were unwilling to commit, understandably so. There were, however, a few interesting answers. The developers of Paladins and Smite said that they are researching the topic, but think it's unlikely that this support would happen in time for the deck's launch. That's very informative, actually. I think that's the most certain answer we've seen thus far of a Steam game not being Linux capable by launch. I think we all knew that there were going to be titles that weren't compatible, but this feels like the first public confirmation of that presumption. On the other hand, Rust devs said they are working on it and hoping to have it done by launch or shortly thereafter. War Thunder, Dead by Daylight, and Ark all have also committed to getting their game Steam Deck ready, but they didn't provide any indication of a timeline. While we're talking anti-cheats, yet another anti-cheat service confirmed that they would provide support for Linux. A general manager at XIGN Code 3 responded to an inquiry about support for Steam Deck, and they responded positively, saying that they're working on it and it will be ready before the release of the Steam Deck. While this anti-cheat is not as known as the others mentioned last week, it's still included in about 50 titles, including DJ Max Respect 5. Let's do a quick dip into Steam Deck adjacent news. BoilingSteam.com put out a list of the top 16 games that are newly playable on Linux. This is similar to a monthly Proton progress report that I have planned for y'all. RPG fans are in for a treat as they list Bravely Default 2, Final Fantasy IV, and Tales of Arise. Also Dice Legacy, Minecraft Dungeons, Metallic Child, and 10 other titles. I'll link this article in the description below. Also Steam Deck adjacent, Phoronix reports that Valve has pushed an update to Proton Experimental that enables DLSS for Direct3D12 games. DLSS was already enabled for Vulkan games, but now it will work for D3D12 games provided that you have a compatible NVIDIA graphics card and a recent driver. Separately, they also pushed an update that made more games playable like Life is Strange, Quake Champions, and Divinity Original Sin 2. This is all good news for me as I look to make Linux my daily driver on my desktop too. Finally, in Deck adjacent news, this piece from Kotaku, they report that Capcom COO stated, Capcom, quote, aims to increase its PC software sales to the point where the platform will make up half of its global sales by the end of 2022, end quote. Also, here's a direct quote from COO Sugimoto. Quote, PC will be the mainstream in the future. Next year or the year after, we want to equalize the ratio of sales to PCs and to dedicated consoles, end quote. Lastly, he says in no uncertain terms, quote, we have recently stated that we will make PC our main platform, end quote. Capcom has been committed to the PC scene for some time now, but it's good to see this level of support, and I hope to see more of it from more Japanese studios and publishers. That does it for this week's news, but I wanted to take some time to answer some questions from the comments. You all have been in the comments heavy, asking some good questions, and I think it'd be good to share some answers with the larger viewership. User 686686 asks, can we use Game Pass on it? Well, there's 3 different answers here. If you pay for Game Pass Ultimate, you can use the xCloud streaming service from the browser. The library for xCloud streaming is very good and always getting better. Battlefield 5, Control, Crackdown 3, and Avengers are all games you could play with cloud streaming. You can also play dope indies like Hollow Knight, Unsighted, Skatebird, Nuclear Throne, and Sable. And you can even play Xbox 360 exclusive classics like Fable, Fallout 3, Gears of War, and Cameo via the cloud. Number 2, if you're looking for a native option, you'll have to install Windows. Microsoft does have a dev kit, so it's possible they're working on Linux compatibility, and the way Microsoft has been going, I wouldn't be surprised if that comes true. But if you don't want to do cloud or install Windows, you're going to be out of luck for now. Next, I published a short where I'm playing the Trans-Ruby demo, and Mrs. Brooke Altimore asked, "What are you playing this on?" Well, that's my GPD-1 Max. Like the Steam Deck, it has an 800p 7-inch panel, but it's built more like a mini laptop with a keyboard. It also has built-in gamepad controls that are small compared to the deck, but quite playable. I'll be gaming on this until I can slang my deck. In this comment, Eric S. notes that the developers of Descenders state that the trackpads didn't work automatically. I believe this is in reference to a tweet from Mike Rose, the founder of No More Robots, who do publish Descenders. In this tweet that is about another game of theirs, Yes Your Grace, he says that they need to add controller support for their mouse and keyboard games like this one. So back to Eric's question, do you think devs will have to add that functionality into their games? In short, no. Steam already gives you really robust tools to remap basically anything on your controller. So I could fire up Yes Your Grace with my Steam controller and download a community profile that already remaps the trackpad to mouse input, and that would work wonderfully. Alternatively, the developers could do a little more work to streamline this by making the trackpads and analog sticks just work by default, and I suspect that's what No More Robots team will do for their games. Finally, I just want to say I was overwhelmed by the reception to Monday's video. I really did intend it to be for the OGs, which I thought was a small group. I didn't expect the outpouring I got. So much positivity and a lot of great feedback. To follow up on that, yes, I will definitely be starting a Discord and may either do a Patreon or a Ko-fi or something like that. Just give me a little time to work through the options and I'll have another update for you soon. And don't forget that on Monday, I'll be announcing the winner, so tune into that video. In the meantime, if you made it this far, you are a real one and you may have heard this before. Like and subscribe, slap the bell to get notified, tell your friend it's a vibe, Deck Gang out. Goodbye.